So I want to make sure we have a ton of time for this discussion. And we have two very, very special guests. And so first, I want to introduce Edward Mukiibi, who is the president of Slow Food International. Eddie is a food and agriculture educator and tropical agronomist who has dedicated his career to promoting agroecological farming as an educational tool to address hunger, poverty, malnutrition, and social injustice. I have had the pleasure of knowing Eddie since 2009 when Bernie, my co-founder, and I first visited him in Uganda, and he was working with a project called Project DISC, which stands for Developing Innovations in School Cultivation. And I'm so happy to call him a friend and somebody I have learned a lot from over the years. And we're joined by Bilal Sarwari, the new interim executive director of Slow Food USA. He is an avid gardener and farmer who has served as a group facilitator and mental health consultant for various organizations, including the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Bilal, I'm so glad to meet you, and I'm so glad you're with us. I want to remind everyone that the first part of this conversation is being recorded for Food Tank's podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. So we ask that everyone stay on mute for now. We'll open it up for questions, Q&A at the end. And right now, if you can help me and our guests, if you could rename yourself in Zoom by clicking on the three dots by your name and then just clicking rename. So with that, I get to talk to two people I really admire, Bilal and Eddie. So thank you again for joining us. I'm so glad you're both here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Danny.
It's so great.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you for hosting us.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to have you. So I'm hoping you can both start by talking about your journeys with slow food. So Eddie, I'm going to start with you first. I know a lot about your journey, but I want you to share it with everyone who's listening.
Thank you, Danny. As you know, my journey with slow food is a long one, and I'm really proud that I met a food movement that is for everyone, that is inclusive, and that is welcoming, and that is open to new ideas and new geographies. So my journey with slow food starts in 2006 when I created the project DISC, the Developing Innovations in School Cultivation project. I talked about it because I wanted to change the narrative and also the practice in schools in Uganda and many other African countries that use farming as a punishment. When you speak the local language, you are punished by sending you to the garden. And this, I wanted to change this when by the time I grew up. So fast forward, in 2006, I created this project in a few schools. And in 2007, I was looking around to organizations that working to promote biodiversity, ecological farming systems, and community-centered alternative food systems. And also looking at education as one of the core values of these organizations, like agriculture education, food education, but also focusing on resilient and sustainable agriculture education. So this is when I sent out an email, and I was in 2008, I sent out this email I found Slow Food International on the website and on the internet, and I sent out an email, and the response was, yes, you're very much welcome. We are having Terra Madre this year. Slow Food is a global grassroots movement that is focusing on biodiversity, food communities, and working on changing system from the grassroots level, from the real people who matter in the food system, the farmers, the chefs, the students, and everyone who enjoys good, clean, and fair food. So this is when I was invited to the my first edition of Terra Madre, but it was Terra Madre 2008. I think it was the third edition of Terra Madre after 2004 and 2007 to meet important people in the global, Sam Levin and others, who are advocating for a change in the food system, starting from the basics, starting from our gastronomy, starting from our culture, from the food that we grow.
Right.
So I became so interested in the philosophy of slow food, and I still believe that this philosophy of slow food was also made for people like me, for young agronomists, for young farmers, for people who are struggling to make a change from the grassroots level, to make people understand how we should grow our food, how we should eat, and how we should work with the planet, and how we should live with the nature. So in 2008, I became a member of Slow Food during Terra Madre in Turin, and I became a very active advocate and practical activist of slow food in Africa. And this is when we also founded the Slow Food Gardens in Africa from the Project Disc idea that, Danny, you know very, very well. You came to visit. It's on this idea that the Slow Food Gardens in Africa was founded. And I was given a chance to expand this idea as an innovative young African. Slow Food facilitated this idea to expand to more than 30 African countries. I visited many communities. I got a chance to inspire many schools to change from using farming as a punishment to teaching agriculture and food as part of life, as a life skill, and also as a motivation for young people on the African continent to feed and nourish the African continent. So this is my journey with slow food. In 2012, I was nominated to become a member of the executive committee of Slow Food International. I was the only member on the committee from the Global South. This is when we started opening up to the realities of slow food elsewhere. And in 2008, alongside Alice Waters, Carlo Petrini appointed me his vice president. And I'm really glad that I served in this position with Alice Waters. I got a lot of advice, a lot of counsel, and a lot of leadership, mentorship from these two great people. And in 2022, during the International Congress that was held in Polenzo at the University of Gastronomic Sciences, I was again appointed by the Congress as the president of Slow Food International. So this has been my journey, and I'm really happy to work with great leaders like Bilal, like many other out there in the food movement.
That's so fantastic. I have to say, Eddie, watching this journey that you have taken and being just a very small part of it, you know, watching and being able to write about your work has been one of the greatest honors of my life. And I know Bernie feels the same way. I do need to mention that Chef Alice Waters is also watching today. So just a shout out to Alice and all of the wonderful work that she's been able to do. Eddie mentioned Terra Madre, and Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, Terra Madre takes place every 2 years. It brings together farmers from all over the world and people who are interested in food, including chefs and people like me who write about food and agriculture. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to bring all of these folks together to celebrate food and diversity, and looking at food, as you said so eloquently, Eddie, as an opportunity and not a punishment. Food is a solution to so many things. So Bilal, I know you have had a great journey with slow food here in the United States. I'm wondering if you can talk about your background and really what inspires you about slow food.
Thank you so much, Danny, and thank you so much for having me. I'm Bilal Sarwari. I'm serving as the interim executive director for Slow Food USA. My contract will last through the end of the year for full transparency, and the board of directors will have the option to make the role permanent. And I have had a much longer journey with slow food than just this year and stepping into this new role. I first was introduced to slow food by my mentor in college, Julie Schaefer, back in 2008. And I started the Slow Food Emory chapter with her after learning a bit more about it. she came and spoke to one of our classes, and I remember distinctly a pamphlet from Slow Food that had a hand holding a cluster of bean pods. And initially I thought that Slow Food was a seed saving organization, and I learned that it is so much more than that. I think what really inspires me about Slow Food is that any person who eats, any person who is interested in food from any aspect, can find belonging in Slow Food.
Oh, nice.
And as the son of Afghan refugees, our family are political exiles from the Soviet invasion back in 1979. So I was born here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I still live. And I always connected to my culture through food. And even though we were living in the diaspora, we were still very much American. We were able to keep our Afghan heritage alive at home through what we ate. And as the years went on, I was introduced to Slow Food in 2008. I realized that Slow Food is the place that is preserving those food traditions, and not only tolerating them, but celebrating them in a lot of meaningful ways. And I eventually joined the board of Slow Food Atlanta, completed a full term there, and was later invited to apply for the board of Slow Food USA, where I served until recently, also as a volunteer. I really am interested in where food connects to health, be it mental health, be it physical health. I ran a therapeutic gardening program for at-risk youth for several years after college. Really enjoyed getting people outside. After that, I farmed at White Oak Pastures for many years and still have a wonderful connection with them. They are an organic farm in Southwest Georgia, and they grow 10 different species of animals on over 3,500 acres of certified organic land. But yeah, Slow Food has been amazing, and I was really honored when I was invited to take on the role of interim executive director, and really am interested in how Slow Food can be the place for everyone to gather, and not only people, but also for organizations like Food Tank and the National Young Farmers Coalition, NSAC, because we're all doing a lot of the same work, really moving the needle in so many different ways. And I see Slow Food as a place for all of us to gather, not in a proprietary way, but as a way of like, hey, we're inviting you to join us to talk about how we can address climate change in ways that we're already doing, but then uniting and nesting under these really big initiatives. And we have to understand that when we talk about fighting climate change, when we talk about making food truly good and truly clean and truly fair, we're kind of standing up to large corporations that are actively standing against us. So it is absolutely imperative for us to unite and show the world that we're already doing this work and we're already channeling our energy in really similar ways.
That unity point is so important. We all have to work together if we want to make the change on these issues that needs to happen. I love that you brought up how Slow Food and people like yourself use this as an opportunity to celebrate food and food culture, and just the wonderful ways that people all over the world are sort of using food as a way to express themselves. I want to come back to the mental health issue, because I know I live in a city, but I have gardens on my deck. And I know if I didn't spend time out there every morning, I would be a less happy person. So it's such an important point. This is a question for both of you, because Slow Food emphasizes the importance of biological and cultural diversity, as we've just talked about. But the climate crisis is really threatening both of those things. And I think one of the reasons for the crisis that we're in right now because of climate change is because of industrial or conventional agriculture practices that have led us down a path of sort of unintended consequences. You know, we're destroying soil health, we're destroying that diversity I talked about, and we're creating more greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the connections, and maybe Eddie, I can start with you, the connections between agriculture and the climate crisis.
Thank you, Danny, for this question. Agriculture is directly connected to the climate crisis in two ways. One, the agricultural system that we have adopted as a generation or even the previous generations, contributes can contribute to the crisis, and it has contributed a lot to the climate crisis. If you look down here in the global south, there are many large chunks of forests which are being cleared to pave way for the monocultural wheat, the monocultural sugar cane, and also the monocultural maize and soya production. And these are suffocating the great lungs of this planet, the lungs through which the planet breathes, the forests in Congo, the tropical forests in Uganda, the Amazon in Brazil, and many other places. They are being cleared, and they are shrinking on a daily basis. This is really suffocating the lungs through which the planet breathes, through which the planet functions. And again, the increased use of agrochemicals, the increased use of fossil fuels in many places, it's as a result of the industrial farming system. As you modify the environment, you modify the ecosystem, you create a fragile environment where crops have to survive only if you apply chemicals through an aerospray, flying aeroplanes over hundreds of miles of crops to spray the crops. In Africa, we never knew this kind of farming. We knew agroforestry, we knew agroecology, we knew systems that create a balance between the environment and production and nourishing the people. But again, everything is changing. Everything changed a lot with the Green Revolution, with the change in the industrial farming. But again, to make matters worse, the livestock sector, subsector in the agricultural and food system is creating a lot of mess. Looking at the industrial intensive livestock farming systems, where you have tens of thousands of animals in a very small place, releasing a lot of bio waste and also a lot of greenhouse gases. These animals need to feed. You need to clear large chunks of natural forests to soy, to grow many other crops that are used in the making of the livestock feed concentrates that are fed to these animals. So looking at all these, agriculture and food production becomes the highest contributor to climate change, contributing to almost a third. Agriculture alone, almost a third of the greenhouse gas emissions. But again, as Slow Food, we believe that food production can be a solution to the climate crisis if we focus on agroecology, if we focus on reviving systems that are actually nourishing the people. We have a lot of problems associated with climate change. Today, we have hunger and food poverty spread across the globe. It's because of the unsustainable production systems that we adopted as humans. And if we go for agroecology, if we revive the traditional farming systems that protect biological and cultural diversity, that preserve these values of the communities, we can overcome hunger, because we are not only looking at feeding the growing population, we are looking at nourishing this population. We are looking at food sovereignty, for people to be at the center of the food system, for the planet to be at the center of the food system, for biodiversity to come back and take its center space as the foundation of our food system. So when we adopt and promote agroecology and other sustainable farming approaches, we recreate an ecological system that is in balance with the equilibrium of the planet, with the feeding and nourishing of the people, but again, promoting the biodiversity, the indigenous, traditional, and different animal and crop species, but as well as also, the production techniques which regenerate the planet. So this is our call to everyone. We
Right.
need to prioritize agroecology. Agroecology as the approach that will resolve the climate crisis. It cannot coexist with the industrial food system. These two systems cannot coexist. We need to shut down the industrial livestock system that doesn't take care of the welfare of the animals, the health, and also the mental well-being of the animals, but also that doesn't take care of the environmental footprint animal intensive industrial animal production has on the environment. We need to adopt systems that promote healthy, good, clean, and fair production of food while taking care of the planet and the agroecological systems. So this is our call as Slow Food. Biodiversity is the foundation of our food systems. It's threatened by climate change, but again, biodiversity can take us out of this climate crisis if we give it priority, if we give agroecology a priority.
It's so true that agroecology can be the solution. We need the political will to be able to do that on a widespread basis so that we can have the good, clean, fair food that Eddie talked about and really put people at the center of this, put the planet at the center of this. Thank you so much, Eddie. Well, I'm wondering if, here in the United States, like me, you've seen this sort of growing understanding between food and agriculture and the climate crisis.
Yeah, I think we are starting to scratch the surface of deeply understanding the way food is produced, not only in this country, but in countries around the world. And I think something we have to acknowledge is that because we've adopted the system of growing food, this is also one of our major exports, showing other countries like, hey, try this, and then they become dependent on chemicals and fertilizers and pesticides that are all petroleum based. And another thing I want to acknowledge is that the system was designed on fragility. We adopted the system after we had a huge surplus of ammonium nitrate after World War II back in the 50s. And we thought, what are we going to do with all of this? That was also around the time we were realizing, like, oh, plants grow a lot when you give them a lot of potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen, and we have stockpiles of it. That's when you start seeing government campaigns for farmers that say plant fence row to fence row, which means if you have 500 acres, you need to plant all of that 500 acres in monoculture. But when you look out to nature, you never see monoculture. It's really rare to see plants growing one after the other, completely, almost genetically identical. And the reason we do that is because we not only had this surplus, we also needed to start propping up the system that was already incredibly fragile, incredibly petroleum based, so which requires extraction. You have to extract as much material out of the ground as you possibly can. You have to extract labor from people either for free through enslavement or through very, very low pay. But you're also extracting people's communities and people's cultures. Danny, earlier you said that biodiversity or the elimination of biodiversity also kind of eliminated our cultural distinctions. And I really resonate with that. When you tell people that tomatoes are red and that's it, you're telling them that you need to promote homogeny, that everything must be the same. And when we start accepting that as the truth, you also start accepting, well, everything else must be the same. All the food that we're eating has to be the same. And why I say that's fragile is because the system is constantly being propped up with artificial inputs. And the reality is that we had a pretty good system before this, especially when you look at indigenous populations around the world. They were living in concert with nature. And not only that, they were supporting it. They realized that they had to follow these natural rhythms to build up not only their own societies, but the natural world around them. They saw them as one and the same. And so when I think about agriculture, I think something that we have to be really good about educating people about is that there are distinctions. The type of agriculture we're promoting is sustainable, it's agroecological, and it is regenerative. And there is a distinction between, as Eddie was saying, when you grow animals in concentrated animal feeding operations, that is releasing a ton of carbon into the atmosphere. Recent studies have shown that animals that are raised out in pasture allowed to work the soil through animal impact are actually sequestering carbon into
Right.
the ground. So not only are they carbon neutral, they're pulling carbon out of the air through their interaction with soil and plants, water and land. And what I want to see for all of our organizations, especially for slow food, is to position farmers, to position agroecology as the solution to climate change instead of seeing agriculture as a detriment to it.
Absolutely. And I love that you sort of, you talked about how, what we're currently doing, what industrial agriculture is currently doing is very extractive, but we can return to this regenerative model. And that homogeneity has really made all of us sort of suffer, and I think in different ways. Eddie, I remember talking to you in the mid 2000s, I guess, about how what indigenous foods were often looked down upon, right? They were considered poor people's foods, and people were encouraged to eat foods that were not part of what was growing around them. And I think this relates to something that I know Bilal is very interested in, which is mental health. When you tell people that their food isn't good, that they need to buy food that's, imported, that comes from other places, that can, I think, place a toll on sort of self-esteem of a community, of a country, on the mental health of farmers in particular, but also all of us as eaters. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit, Eddie, and then I'll turn back to you, Bilal.
Thank you, Danny. I think, this is like a paradoxical situation that we have here, especially in the global south, especially in Africa here. I've been to more than 32 African countries, and you find that in many, many countries, the fast food or junk food is promoted as the elite class food, and the traditional local food is normally underlooked as the poor people's food, and also the food that should not be eaten by people whose income transforms from low to middle and to high income. And it's true to many countries. When you go to many cities like in Kampala, in Nairobi, in Ibadan, in Nigeria, also I see station in Lilongwe. I think it's true in Malawi. So when you go to the fast food restaurants, you find the high class people there, the high income people there, because the fast food, like the American imported chicken and other kind of brands, they are promoted as high income meals and high class meals. So this is kind of the mental kind of degradation, and also the mental washing for the people who have money to be tricked into consuming unhealthy food. You find that also in the global south, the effects of, like, the public health effect of bad food, like the non-communicable diseases, are most prevalent in the high income communities. It's the opposite for the global north, where the non-communicable diseases and other public health effects of food-related problems are most prevalent in the low-income communities. So this is something that we, as Slow Food, we are working on greatly through our central pillar of education. Because this is a question of education, the question of raising awareness and influencing people's choices, and showing people that eating healthy does not mean eating imported wheat, imported sugar, imported chicken, imported potatoes. Eating healthy means eating local. That's why we run campaigns. Like right now in Uganda, we are running a very big campaign on eating local, and publishing a lot of information about the biodiversity of food that we have as a country that is gifted by nature as the Pearl of Africa, why people should eat local, why it's healthy to eat food from less than 20 miles away, and why it's healthy to eat traditional food. But it's a very big struggle that we have with the big market the fast multinational corporations that are promoting their brand as the food that should be eaten by the people with the high income and with the elite class. So
Right.
yes, it's something that we are effectively working on through education. But again, it's a long struggle ahead,
Right.
but it's something that we can do, all of us, to promote this healthy eating through our populations.
Eddie, I remember standing in a garden with you in Uganda, and you telling me that, people, tend to think that they're poor, but look at all of this abundance, look at all of this richness that Uganda has, and because it has so much of this biological diversity, it has such rich cultural diversity. And I think that's good to keep in mind. So thank you for making me remember that memory, because it means a lot to me. Bilal, I know mental health and mental health awareness and using agriculture as a way to heal is something very important to you. Can you talk a little bit more about it?
I can, yes. Most recently, I was hired as a consultant for an organization called Cultivemos. And Cultivemos is funded by a USDA grant called the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. And in the Northeast, a few nonprofits got together and decided that instead of allowing all of this funding just to go to the extension services, which don't really have a framework for behavioral and mental health, instead they got together and they said, we'll create something. And so for the past few years, they've been working on that. And I've learned so much from just working with the amazing individuals involved with that project. And the main thing that really resonated with me is that a lot of us already know what we're doing, and a lot of us already have the skills. We're already empowered to protect our mental health and our emotional health while we're doing jobs like that are involved with agriculture, that are farming, because the reality is, especially in the United States, farming can be an incredibly isolating career, especially when the type of farming you're doing that is local and sustainable isn't fully appreciated by the general community. And I love that we're seeing a shift toward that. But what I realized is that allowing farmers to get together to form cohorts around affinity. My project was to create a farmer cohort program where these weren't really mental health support groups. Instead, they're places where farmers who already had a lot of coping skills were sharing them with other farmers. So the main thing that I saw that was lacking was communication. When you're feeling isolated, the counter to that is to communicate and to show that, yes, there are Black and brown farmers who are doing the same kind of farming as you all around the Northeast, all around the country. There are trans farmers that are doing a lot of incredible work, that through their own identity and intersectional identities realize that this is their link to nature and this is their link to farming. And some really incredible projects came from that. And I really feel that just simply getting people together and showing them that, like, hey, you're already doing a really great job. You just need to name it and acknowledge it. From there, the possibilities are endless.
That's wonderful. And it's wonderful to connect people with those coping skills with the folks who might not have them yet. And I love this idea of bringing those folks who don't look like, the white male farmer on a tractor into community, and, having them, be part of something bigger than themselves and learn all those skills that you mentioned. I do want to leave time for Q&A. So I think my final question for you both is, Eddie, you were recently quoted in an interview saying that you feel really hopeful about the future of our food and agriculture systems. I share that optimism, but I wonder, there's a lot happening in the world right now politically. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of hunger and food poverty, as you mentioned earlier, Eddie. What gives you hope when all of these sort of forces outside of us are sort of, giving us the opposite feeling of hopelessness?
Thank you, Danny. What gives me hope is that the world is increasingly becoming aware that the industrial system is even creating more problems than solutions to the current global food crisis and food and climate crisis. A lot of people are becoming increasingly aware. This system through which we have worked and lived over the last 58 years is not working.
Right.
It's actually pushing us more and more into more problems. So a lot of people are becoming increasingly aware. And we are becoming increasingly aware that we need to get back to the basics and support local food systems, support building local economies. And thanks to the pandemic, it created a lot of awareness about the failures and the weaknesses of the global food system. We need to work towards food sovereignty. Everyone, even in the US, you need to work a lot on United States food sovereignty. US is the country with a lot of food deserts, and it's very clear that if we continuously, or if we continue to depend on the global food, the key giant players in the food system, more and more people are becoming hungry, more and more people are becoming poor, more farmers are dropping out of production, and the environment is becoming more and more messed up. So a lot of people are becoming aware of this. And again, we need to act so fast on the climate crisis. Every time I move around, today I'm on the farm, and yesterday and Saturday I was visiting many farmers out there. They all agree that we need to plant more trees. We need to go back to the agroforestry system because the monoculture system doesn't work
Eddie, you're cutting out. Okay.
Traditional farming. But again, a lot of people have become.
Eddie has unfortunately cut out a little bit. So there.
Take off the video.
Yes.
I was saying that.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I was saying that more and more young people are becoming conscious of the future. This gives me a lot of hope, and we need to work with these young people.
Absolutely. And I think, you mentioned the awareness that needs to, that is happening, that the education that is happening. Slow Food International and Slow Food USA have been such a key part of spreading that awareness around food as the solution to so many of our problems, as I mentioned before. You mentioned this idea, Eddie, of local resilience. I think that's what you're doing every day in your work, no matter what country you're in, is you're building that local resilience with your hope and your optimism. And I want to bring up something that Bilal mentioned before. The US has so many problems, as Eddie pointed out. We have set a really bad example for the rest of the world. It's time to break that cycle, and we have to have a better example. And all countries, we need to be learning. The United States needs to be learning from other countries, like, where Eddie has been working in Uganda, what's happened in farms all across Afghanistan as they rebuild and try to make sure that their cultural diversity is acknowledged and honored. So, Bilal, what gives you hope as you continue on this journey with your work?
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is moments like these, where I see that there are many organizations and many people who have taken the time to educate themselves on the issues that we're facing, climate change being possibly the main one. We are working to make sure that we have a planet to live on in the next few years. And what gives me hope is that I do see the needle shifting, and I do see a lot of excitement around it. At Slow Food, we talk a lot about joy and justice. This work of building up a more robust and locally focused food system doesn't have to be so grim. We can be really excited to join around food and to gather around the table and talk about these things, and not only talk, but then employ meaningful action. When I look at the United States and I see how much hunger there is, how much poverty, there should be no reason why in this country, one of the most wealthy countries in the world, that a single person should be hungry. And it really goes to show you that this fragile food system that we've allowed to be set up was never really about feeding people. It was really about treating food as a commodity like steel or like coal. And the danger in that is when you start taking on that mentality, it starts affecting the rest of your thinking. We treat our bodies like cars. We go to the doctor expecting to be tuned up like a car at the auto shop without really thinking about what the inputs are. What kind of food are you eating? How are you emotionally? All these things go to creating a very healthy body. But that shift in thinking is happening. I see it on Instagram. I see it on the news. I see it with conversations with friends. People inherently understand that a deeper connection to nature, a diverse diet should be reflected in our agricultural systems through biodiversity. And we are making it happen. I have a lot of hope because we don't have another choice. This is going to happen because it is about survival at this point, and it's about celebrating the good things that we're already doing. And I see it, and the way we at Slow Food do it, both on the international level and here at Slow Food USA, is through promoting biodiversity, is through education, and it's also through advocacy, through political action.
Absolutely. Eddie, you raised your hand.
Yeah, just wanted to add on to what Bilal said, but also the focus on young people as the future of this planet is central to the DNA and the life of Slow Food. We've been doing a lot of work with the school children in Africa, in the US, in Europe, in Asia, in many other places, and we want to make sure that children and young people understand the future of the food systems does not lie in the hands of the few corporations, but in the hands of the millions of smallholder farmers, the millions of people who operate small gardens in their localities, and also people who are able to grow their own food and tell what's the difference between good food and food that is not good. So this is also something that gives me a lot of hope. Looking at the work I have done in Africa, the work Chef Alice has done in the US, the work my colleagues have done, like Jean-Marie in West Africa, the work Chin Chin has done in the Philippines and the Southeast Asia. This gives me a lot of hope, and I say we are on the right track, and we are actually working towards a proper and real transformation of this food system, and we are not backing down, but again, only to renew our commitment to the transition that we need.
And thank goodness people like you and Bilal have not backed down. I love the idea of joy and justice and a food and agriculture movement that works for everyone. Go ahead, Eddie. Maybe you didn't mean to raise your hand there. That's okay. I would love to open it up to Q&A. This has been such a fascinating conversation with these two amazing folks. So I'm wondering if we can, let me look at the chat. I know a lot of you have been commenting. And I know my friend Stacia Nordine from Malawi has also joined, and she always has good questions. I hope she'll go back on video. Nice to see you, Stacia. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts for Eddie and Bilal, since you've been doing this work for so long around permaculture and agroecology.
Of course, I'm inspired, Danny. I just love everything that they've said. My real focus these days is on where our food comes from. I work with a lot of nutritionists. I'm a dietitian, and I think dietitians are really good at balancing the food system. But I would like them to take one step further to the things that Eddie and Bilal have been talking about. What food system are we advising people to get their foods from? And there's so much more evidence out there now for nutrient density, that our foods are healthier when they're grown in healthy environments. So that's my big focus. Let's get dietitians on board. Thanks.
I love it. That makes a lot of sense. It's very common sense for sure. Great. So Chris Rowley from the chat says, and Chris, if you're here and want to come on screen, that would be great. Smallholder farmers, you say, need capital, and we need a better finance system to make sure that there is not a preference for big industrial farms. I don't know if Bilal or Eddie wants to comment on that, that, smallholder farmers need the investment that other farmers have been getting for a long time.
Yeah, I can comment that on that, Danny. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I'm happy and privileged to be a smallholder farmer here in Uganda because I manage a 5-acre agroecological family farm that we have cultivated for generations. And I totally agree that smallholder farmers need capital, especially in the transition from the conventional based production system to agroecological based systems, especially in the short run. This is why in the transition to agroecological and sustainable food systems, we need everyone on board. We need those who can give impact investment to smallholder farmers, people who understand that it's the smallholder farmers make the greatest impact on this food system than the large scale farmers. We need everyone on board because you cannot change the food system alone as a farmer. Even if you try to do everything perfectly, you need the financiers on board, you need the technical experts on board, you need the political experts on board. So it's true that smaller farmers also need investment to properly transition to agroecological food systems. And that's why at Slow Food we are launching the Slow Food Farms initiative to take care of also to give visibility to these smallholder farmers who are actually doing great, and they need partners. They need to show their work, they need to present their work, and they need to meet a lot of other stakeholders in the transition to agroecology.
I love it. That need for a just transition is so big. Chef Alice has been raising her hand. I'm sorry I missed you, Alice. It's very nice to see you. You're on mute, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Well, I just feel like the universals are education and farming. And why don't we use the money for the procurement of food in schools to support the people who are taking care of the land locally? Now, I know that the mayor of Paris decided she was only going to buy food for the schools of Paris from 125 miles and only from regenerative organic farmers. And already in 1 year, they're 2/3 of the way there. And I know that if we don't use the middleman, like we have done at Chez Panisse, we don't give money for the delivery. That takes away from the farmer. If we give the farmers and the ranchers the real cost, buy directly for them, we can change it overnight. Seriously. And I hope everybody will come to an event we're doing in DC mid-October at the Smithsonian called Climate Food Hope. And we're going to show that we can make a school lunch within the USDA reimbursement that is organic, local, or regenerative. So I hope you'll all be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chef Alice Waters. Always a pleasure to hear from you. The power of procurement, as Alice explained, is so powerful. And if a city like Paris can do it, it shows that it can be done anywhere. We'll have more information on Food Tank's website about the Smithsonian event that Alice mentioned as well. And Food Tank is really happy to support that in whatever way we can. Are there any other questions? And Elena and Bernie, okay, so Noel Gerwick raised their hand.
Hi, and I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm so excited about the Smithsonian event. I'll be there if I can be there. So I'm so appreciative of the work that this group does and the vision for what a better food system in the world could be and the work that you're doing. And I have a piece of it. There's a piece of the conversation that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and I wanted to ask people what they thought about it. And it's the connection to the climate crisis, which is where my expertise is. I worked at the U.S. Agency for International Development for 10 years on low emissions agriculture. I've done a bunch of other things in my career. I'm completely convinced that the kinds of agriculture and food system that this group is talking about increases the resilience of the land and of the food system. I think it's a harder case to make that it actually reduces greenhouse gas emissions. I wouldn't want to be in the position of going up against a panel of distinguished agricultural scientists to make the case that a certain number of livestock in a feedlot leads to lower emissions than the same livestock spread out over the landscape. And the link that I put in the chat about Project Drawdown, I think kind of points a little bit to that the levers in the food system for mitigation are really on dietary shift and food loss and waste. So the question I have for you guys is, how do you think about this? I mean, it makes me nervous to have this one piece of the kind of narrative around a better food system that I believe in so much, but that particular piece of the argument seems kind of tenuous. And I'm wondering whether other people, Eddie, Bilal, Danny, whether you have that same kind of skittishness about it.
Bilal, do you want to go first?
I'd be happy to. Yes. And so I base a lot of what I believe around farms being not only regenerative and farms that promote agroecology. I believe that they can very easily be carbon neutral, but I also sincerely believe that they can reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. There was a release of a life cycle assessment study a few years ago of a farm I used to work on called White Oak Pastures. I'd be happy to put that in the chat.
Great.
And they were able to show that by converting land that was formerly under industrial agriculture to regenerative agriculture, using animal impact, using organic methods, they were able to, and this is in total, so the amount of gas that was used in trucks to go across the fields to move animals from one pasture to pasture, all of that was accounted for. Even after all of that, they found that the long-term benefit of using pasture raised and rotational grazing did pull and sequester carbon into the ground to be net carbon negative. And so my answer to you, Noel, is that I agree. Right now, we need more studies. We need more research on that, and I think it's our job to promote that. You can't base an entire movement based on a single study. So I think I have seen a few more coming up, but I think this is something that our science community really needs to start promoting and researching.
Absolutely. Eddie, I want to make sure that you get the last word, my friend.
Yeah, I will speak from, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, Eddie, we can hear you.
Hello.
Eddie, it looks like you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I will speak from the soil science point of view, and also from the agronomist, but also as a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
If the animals are spread out and they are grazing on the open lands, the rate of organic matter mineralization when the manure is exposed to sunlight is a bit faster. And also the manure has the potential to support the growth of the bioeconomy of the soil, like microorganisms feeding on the manure, and also these microorganisms, they have the potential to work on the carbon and also to pull a lot of carbon before it turns into methane. But when the animals are concentrated and you have tons and tons of manure piled up together, it chemically starts producing a lot of methane. That is a terrible greenhouse gas. So that is something that we need. We need also to discuss from the farmer's experience, from the soil science point of view. By individual animals on the grassland is quickly taken up and used by the microorganisms and also used by the soil. Other than that, is piled to ferment and produce the dangerous gases that create an ecological imbalance in the atmosphere. So this is something that the reality that we need to open up to and discuss.
Absolutely.
But again,
go ahead.
Again, also, yeah, this manure is very important in the regeneration of the pasture land, of the rangelands, and also of the biological properties of the soil. Other than that, is piled up and run through the livestock sewer systems. Sometimes it ends up in the oceans. Sometimes it ends up in landfills and many other places.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Really clear explanation and appreciate that. And I think, what it comes down to is, we need systems that not only just focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but really look at things holistically. And when we become sort of tunnel visioned on carbon, we can, sort of miss things that are happening, like, improving soil health or improving biological diversity. I am so excited that we were able to have this conversation. I want to thank Bilal and Eddie for joining us. I want to thank all of you as audience members and listeners for being part of the discussion. So great to see you all, and we look forward to the next Food Tank member meeting in July with U.S. Congress member Jim McGovern. So you'll get more information about that very soon. Thank you all so much, everyone, but especially thank you to Eddie, my old friend. You are just my hero, and I was so happy to see you. Thanks, everyone.